Hello everybody. This is my project for lesson 4. I selected The Dark Tower, The Gunslinger Born. This is a graphic novel in collaboration with Marvel and Dark Horse Comics. Let's get started. This is directed by Stephen King. Let's see here. Script is by Peter David, and the art is by Jay Lee and Richard Eisenhoff. Sorry if I didn't get that right, but Jay Lee is one of my favorite artists, and I'll try to show some of the artwork as we go along. Really, what we're looking at here is a story arc. This is kind of a prequel to the Dark Tower series, the novels, actually. It talks about our hero, Roland Deschain, and his kind of journey to manhood and his first adventure that he actually goes on as a young adult. The first comic in the series is about Roland facing his mentor. His mentor trains him for some time, really isn't very nice to him. At the end of the first novel, he ends up fighting his mentor to really become a man. Also, through this arc, you actually get to find out more about, I guess, the villains or the shadows in this story. The main one being the Crimson King, who is just the embodiment of all evil. Some other characters would include Jonas, who's kind of the main person that he faces towards the end of this graphic novel series or this comic series. And we get to find out a lot about some of his friends, which he actually references as well in the novel series. So getting into it, let's get started. The world that he's in is called Midworld. With this, the main area, or I guess where he's from, is called Gilead. It's really one of the only remaining, I wouldn't necessarily say habitable, but civilized areas. The first comic takes place there. Once he defeats his mentor, he runs from Gilead because it's no longer safe for him due to some other circumstances involving the Man in Black, who is also a shadow in this particular series and throughout the entire Dark Tower series as well. So the adventure itself, or I guess graphic novels 2 through 7, actually involve him in a place called Hambry. He brings his allies with them. Those are going to be Elaine and Cuthbert. They travel with him along the path. They really give him guidance throughout the story, because in this particular case, he's not your typical hero. I would say he's more of an anti-hero and a Byronic hero. There's really a lot of flaws with him, and since it is early in his life, he kind of grows to become the gunslinger that you see in the actual novel series. So a lot of trials that he faces really build him as a man. I did at some point actually forget to mention that his herald, or I guess the person that starts this story for him, is actually his father, who sends him on his first mission. Due to the fact that there is a threat that he needs to get Roland out of Gilead, just because it's no longer safe for him there, because the enemy or the shadows know that he will be a future threat. So that's actually what begins the adventure for him. So on the adventure itself, let's get into that. As the second comic begins, we are introduced to, I guess, the antagonist or the main shadow in the comic book series. That's going to be the Big Coffin Hunters, led by Jonas, who even looks threatening, and he's the sheriff of the town, even though he is really a traitor to good, and ultimately the biggest threat to Roland. We're also introduced to, I guess, your trickster. She is Rhea of the Coos, a witch that lives outside of Hambry, which is, the main area in which the story takes place. We're also introduced to Susan Delgado. She is going to be Roland's first love and also an ally to him throughout the comic book series. The second comic book ends with the introduction of Susan Delgado to Roland. Also, we're introduced to a supernatural element, an item called Merlin's Rainbow, which is the pink orb that you see here. That comes into play throughout it, although it's not of any aid to Roland throughout this graphic novel series, although it is in the books. The third book introduces John Farson, who is I guess, the main villain in the series, although he doesn't face Roland directly. He's the reason for Roland coming to Hambry to investigate. So Roland and his two allies arrive at Hambry. This is going to be the kind of unknown element. Roland's never been outside of Gilead, so he realizes quickly that this town or territory is full of threats. We're looking at, really, he doesn't know who the enemy is at this point in time. I mean, we've been introduced to who they are. Roland, throughout really the remaining comic books, investigates, tries to find out, who the enemy is with, his allies. Throughout doing this as well, there is a lot of story building between Roland and Susan Delgado. As the story continues, we find out that the big coffin hunters are finding armaments and supplies for John Farson and the army that he's building for the Crimson King. Some of the trials that Roland faces in this particular story involve his allies losing trust in him, or Roland putting the mission in jeopardy by really his relationship with Susan Delgado. His allies believe that their mission is to come here and stop the threat of John Farson and the big coffin hunters, while Roland is more enthralled in some points with Susan. So throughout the graphic novel series, Roland discovers really who the threat is. He prepares for a final battle between Jonas, the big coffin hunters, and Roland and his allies. That includes Elaine, Cuthbert, as well as Susan Delgado. At the end of the final ordeal, Roland faces Jonas one-on-one, at which point he is victorious by this awesome depiction here. And he also takes down the army that has been raised throughout the comic series. But the tale does end tragically with the death of Susan Delgado. Roland is forced to watch her through Merlin's Rainbow, which is that pink orb that I described earlier. So being so far away from her, he cannot save her. And the novel ends with him staring into Merlin's Rainbow, and really with his allies beside him. And there's no real reward for Roland in this, at least nothing tangible. I mean, he did lose his love, although he was able to complete the task that was given to him at the beginning of the second novel. Overall, all 7 books really give you insight into Roland's character that you see throughout the novel series. So yeah, that is the story of the Gunslinger Born. With, I guess, the next minute or so that I have, I'm just going to go over some of the artwork that I really like. So these frames here are the battle between Roland and Court, his mentor. I just really like the way that it's depicted, although it is a little bit graphic. It really has an awesome battle over the few pages that are involved, and you see Roland victorious here, just really with the shadows and the way that it's drawn. I think it's fantastic. Probably one of my favorite pieces of art of all time is the true form of the Crimson King, surrounded by Merlin's Rainbow, which are just a ton of magic orbs, and they all contain their own powers, and it's just really cool. The colors that they use in this, I think, are fantastic. The scenes are normally cast in different colors. They just kind of give some really nice background to it. The yellows, the purples. I mean, there's just a ton of great color throughout this. I just think it's really neat. Outside of the art in the comic book itself, there is a lot of background going into the guns that are used by Roland, Merlin's Rainbow, the Crimson King. There's a lot of background that builds on the story of the graphic novel series. So anyway, I think that is it. Hopefully you liked it. Again, my first web cam thing ever. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. Thank you.